Hi, this is Regina Y. Favors with Favors Single Life Tips. So, we are still on the same discussion regarding this viral post where the guy says that he's going to exit a relationship with his current girlfriend when he finds a decent job and pursue his preference or basically his type. And so there's already a full discussion on this particular post. It's under an hour, and the title of it is Favor Single Life Tips Preventing Entitlement. And the reason why I titled it in that way is because the writer of this post uses the word entitlement at the end in the third paragraph. So I want to take some time to look at this same post, but from individual perspectives. And the very first one that I want to consider is risk assessment. And we usually think about risk assessment in terms of a business concept, but I feel that we could apply it to the romantic relationship context. So I'm going to read the post and then we're going to look at risk assessment. First, the, the definition for risk assessment is a systematic process of evaluating the potential risks that may be involved in a projected activity or undertaking. So the projected activity or undertaking is essentially romantic relationship building. And if we are looking at the individual who wrote this post, who basically implies that he's broke, he doesn't have the financial resources to take care of himself and keep his own place. So we have to assume that he is living with the current girlfriend because there's this expectation of marriage, but somehow the guy feels that the current girlfriend is wrong to expect that, to be entitled to that. So let me read the post and then add some analysis based upon this concept of risk assessment. I can't believe my girlfriend really think that I'm going to marry her and we'll live happily ever after. Soon as I get a decent job, I'm going to leave her and start dating my types. People need to understand that we are not entitled to be with them forever just because they were with us when we were broke. We each have our own preference, and that doesn't make me love my current girlfriend any less. Things change, feelings change. It's a vicious life cycle. If my girl could leave me for a guy who's well established and appreciates her more than I do, I would gladly accept and never hold her hostage just because she's been with me through thick and thin. This entitlement over people's lives is the reason people resort to violent behavior. So, just a quick note, I called attention within the full discussion, I called attention to this reference to violent behavior. And the implication is that if you insist on trying to make a partner stay with you, this guy here is essentially suggesting that he might use violent behavior to get your attention because he's still going to leave. It doesn't matter what you say and what you do, he's already made up his mind to leave. So now let's look at risk assessment then, because violent behavior is something that you need to consider when you are assessing for risk. Um, as you continue a relationship. Within the last year or so, there have been an increase of black men killing black women. And that is something to consider because many of these incidences have been related to the person being pregnant. And no one would think that being pregnant in a romantic relationship would garner a risk. But if a person is saying he does not want a child, even if you get pregnant and he is a contributing factor to you getting pregnant, the person is saying he doesn't want a child. So that means he doesn't want to participate in any kind of way, especially financially. Then if you continue to try to make him part of the child's life and maybe take him to court for child support, you run the risk of his violent behavior. And again, many of these incidences, criminal incidences, have been related to a woman who was currently pregnant or already had the individual's kids, and so there might have been a pursuit of child support with the courts, or just trying to bring the family back together again. But that is a huge risk. So when we're thinking about risk assessment, this systematic process of evaluating the potential risks that may be involved in a projected activity or undertaking, the projected activity here is this idea that the woman believes, the current girlfriend believes, that the relationship that she has with her partner, who is the writer of this post, is going to convert to long term, possibly to marriage. And he's suggesting and saying directly that that is not going to happen. And she didn't take that into consideration, that it would not happen. People tend to stick out with relationships, especially women, with the assumption that it's actually going to convert long term, because women automatically just don't jump from relationship to relationship. And when they find a relationship that they can continue to build upon, they would rather invest time, money, heart, body, financial resources, shelter, anything to sustain um, the relationship, even if they are not always clear about the man's love language and how he should be loved. They will do all that they can to make sure that he is loved. So here it is, you have this current girlfriend, and we don't have her viewpoint, but based upon his assessment of his current girlfriend and her belief system, she believes that the relationship is going to convert long term. So then, if she believes that, based upon his assessment or his assumption, then she's taken into consideration that, okay, he's not where he needs to be in terms of having a decent job. So that's further suggests that she must be the one who is the breadwinner, or has the decent job, because he doesn't reference her as not having a decent job, and not having financial resources. Even though he doesn't clearly outline whether he is staying with her in her house, we have to assume that he is, because if he had his own place, or he wasn't living with his parents or something like that, he wouldn't need to make the case um, that when he gets a decent job, he's going to leave, or he's going to begin choosing his dating type. So on some level, he must be living with her. Um, so then the risk here is she is holding out some form of hope that once he gets a decent job, then he's going to propose. And so then the assumption is also that that's what he told her, that I don't have a decent job, that's why I don't want to marry you. I want to marry you first. I want to marry you when I get a decent job, right? And you hear this a lot from men, that they're not where they need to be, and so they want to take some time to get to where they need to be in terms of financially. Well, that's not really going to work if you are living with her. If and we don't know what is preventing him from getting a decent job. It could be an educational background. It could be lack of skill set. He could be just a person who is new to the job market. But either way, he's saying that he doesn't have a decent job. So either he doesn't have a job at all, or he doesn't have the type of job he really wants. And when a woman engages a romantic partner with this type of thinking, she takes on the risk of him not being a financial provider, of believing him when he says, wait till I get a decent job and we can get married, with no real concrete date in mind. And she just assumes that when that happens, when he gets a decent job, which is keeping her on hold mentally and emotionally and psychologically, as well as financially, she's hoping that it's going to convert. But when you think about the risk assessment aspect of it, there is no guarantee that whatever he proposed to her in terms of waiting for marriage is actually going to happen, because if he is the type of person who really wants to be married to her, as long as he has a job, they can work on the other stuff. He may not be where he needs to be, but he still has a job. That means that he is an adult and he knows what it means to be an adult. And they're already living together, assumedly. And so if they're already living together and making contributions, you might as well go on ahead and get married. But it's clear that he framed her as a person to not marry, because we know that to be true because he doesn't consider her his preference. That's another risk that many women, risk assessment that many women need to conduct, because these men out here are in this mindset of preferences and options, and they are also cultivating um, multiple relationships in the form of dating rotations. And so they are not in a marriage mindset, let alone a long-term commitment mindset. And you run the risk of dealing with someone who doesn't see you as a preference. Even if you are good to the person, and even if the person knows you are good for him, if you are not the preference, the type that he wants, it doesn't matter what kind of investment you make. Investment is also a risk that you need to assess the risk when it comes to how much and how long and how much are you willing to invest and how long are you willing to invest, because otherwise you are just essentially providing caregiving to a person who has no intent to stay with you. Basically, you are just housing a person who doesn't have anywhere else to go and is using your house, your physical house, and your body to pass the time. They don't have anywhere else to live because they don't have a decent job to pay for somewhere else to live. So they're going to take up residence in your house because you are not their preference. And I don't know if you are even their option. But he does say on some level that he loves his current girlfriend, so she is still considered an option. But that's only if he can't find his preference. So that means he will prolong and procrastinate this relationship that he has with the current girlfriend until he meets his preference. So then she would always remain an option. The current girlfriend will always remain an option. And that's a risk assessment that you have to consider when it comes to your investment. That's why it's very important not to move in a man as a woman, because you are really under no obligation to care for an adult man. And I do have a blog article that I will leave a link in the description about don't move in a man as a woman, because you are a single woman. You are not a married woman. And even though we have all engaged in common law cohabitation exercises, exercises does not mean that we are really responsible for that individual. So we've been giving out marital benefits without the title of marriage, without the record of marriage. And so we do that with the understanding, again, that it's going to convert, but it's not going to convert. So thinking about investment, thinking about the fact that the man doesn't consider his girlfriend as a preference, and also the fact that he has framed her as a person to not marry. That even if he never finds his preference, does not necessarily mean that he will marry her in his heart. He could marry her to secure some access to financial resources so he doesn't have to pay 100% rent or other types of resources or whatever, other types of responsibilities. So he could still marry her, But in his mind, he still is in search of his preference. And he could be married to her for 10, 15, 20 years, leave her when he finds his preference, exits, um, do a divorce, exit the relationship, and go and marry his preference. It happens all the time. And that is a risk that you have to consider. And it would be better if you had a very good understanding of who he is as a person before you took on the risk. So let's look at the second paragraph. People need to understand that we're not entitled to be with them forever just because they were with us when we were broke. We each have our own preference, and that doesn't make me love my current girlfriend any less. Things change, feelings change. It's a vicious life cycle. So let's take the aspect of change. That is always a risk. A person can change their mind at any time. At least when you are married, the person has to go through a longer reflection process, consideration, exit consideration process. The judge at the courthouse for the divorce court will require the partners to talk, go to therapy, do a number of things before there is a quick exit. Even divorcing has its own process. It's not like you can go straight to the courthouse and go get a divorce, right? You still have a process there. So your feelings might change, but they could also change back when you are married. However, when you are just living together, the person can easily come home, pack his or her bags, move out, and that be it. I don't always think it's completely it because people always try to leave the door open. But this ideal about things change, feelings change, it is a vicious life cycle. I noted in the previous audio, the longer audio, that people don't just change. I think they already have that in their mind that they're not going to stay and that they're just using you as a short-term mating strategy, which is a form of rebounding, using you to take up the time they need before they move on with their life. So that is a risk because people can change their mind. You have people who divorce at 33 years of marriage. I've always been very surprised at that they are willing to divorce after 33 years. I figured to myself, if you can go 25 years, you can go 26. If you can go 30, you can go 31. You can go 33, you can go 34. But to divorce after so many years without any consideration to stick it out beyond that mere feeling of wanting to exit the relationship is just really interesting to me. And I don't judge. I don't judge because if you feel like you're tired in a relationship and you don't want to continue, I don't know what the situation is. Um, I always feel that if there's infidelity of any sort, any type of cheating or something like that, that's a deal breaker. I'm not going to have a heart attack. I'm not going to have health issues in my life because my partner uh, just wants to adopt a lifestyle of cheating. I can't live like that. Sometimes there may be exceptions to the rule. There may be a person who has had childhood sexual trauma that has never gotten healed, and that maybe the person is loose in the streets because they never dealt with their childhood sexual trauma. And so then by the time they get with you, it may be a struggle. And I don't know, you may need to work with that person because you can't quit everybody. But if the person adopts cheating as a lifestyle, as something that is a belief system for them, you can't stay with that person. And what this person is suggesting, that things change, feelings change, it is a vicious life cycle, and connecting it to when he finds a decent job, he's going to start dating his types. Then he's going to start dating his types while he's in a relationship with the current girlfriend. He's just not going to tell her. That means he's going to seek an affair partner. He's going to cultivate a backup mate for mate insurance. And the backup mate hypothesis, mate switching hypothesis, is all in the psychology literature, where a person will seek to exit one relationship and secure another relationship as a form of mate insurance while they are still in relationship with someone else. And this things change, feelings change. It is a vicious life cycle. It's something that suggests patterns of behavior that he might have cultivated backup mates in his past with a previous relationship. And that's why it's important to sit down and have conversations with potential partners, especially at the dating phase, because you need to know their pattern of behavior. One of the questions that we need to always ask: when was your recent relationship? If a person just got out of a relationship within the first 6 months, that is not the person to consider for dating. That might be a person to hang out with, become friends with, talk on the phone with, but that person is still fresh out of a relationship with someone that they may have an emotional, psychological attachment to. And I mean, think about it: if they have kids with the person, if there's some sort of financial obligation with the person, people always love returning to their exes. I don't think that's fair. If you are in a relationship with someone, you need to commit to that person. But again, people like to keep their options open. Another risk then would be when you are taking on someone who is broke. He must be broke if he doesn't have a decent job, and we have to assume that he's living with the current girlfriend, because he is the one who references the word broke. And when you are taking on the risk of dealing with a man who is broke, and you are investing financial resources to help him get to a better financial state, you always risk the person being resentful that you helped him. You always. There's nothing. I don't remember ever hearing about any man being thankful that a woman helped him in his financial condition. I don't believe that. They might say, "Oh, okay, thank you for this or whatever," but at some point you didn't, as a man, accomplish the task yourself, and you needed a woman to help you to do it. If the woman is a friend, then there may not be any real resentment. There may not be any sort of spite. But if the woman is a romantic partner, rest assured he's going to always feel like he owes her something, even if he's paid her something. And sometimes women do have a way of saying something about how they helped you as an individual, as their man, that may be a little offensive. So you run the risk of helping someone who is broke, basically out the door, that there's no guarantee that the person will stay with you just because you help them. It would be better for an adult man to help himself. And if he can't help himself, to seek out help from a family member or another male friend. To ask his current girlfriend or current woman who is not a wife, to help him while he is broke is going to have um, some consequences. It's not going to go well. I have noted in certain comments about women who help men while they are married that the woman will put the man through medical school, law school, or any type of schooling. Once he gets on his feet in terms of education and finds that professional job that worked for him, he decides to exit the marriage and divorce the woman who actually helped him and loved him and was there for him, and marry someone who didn't do anything for him at all. And that's another risk. That is absolutely another risk, because it goes back to the idea that the woman that he is with, the current girlfriend that he is with, is not considered his preference. And so it does, again, it doesn't matter what she does for him, he doesn't care. He's going to leave her when he gets a decent job. He's not going to marry her. She is not considered a preference. She could stay an option until he finds his preference. But he has already framed her as a person that he can leave. So that's another risk that you take when you move in a man. when you help a man financially, when you invest too long, when you don't recognize his belief system early? Is he a person who stays in relationships? What was the last relationship? How long was that relationship? And that you have to take into consideration age. If he's 20 years old, he's not going to have any long lasting relationships. I do think it's noteworthy that if he's 20 years old and he was in a relationship in high school for like 4 years with one person, I think that's something to consider, that he cares about sticking it out. But if he's a person who jumps from relationship to relationship to relationship, you're going to have a very hard time with him being in relationship with him. So that is another risk. And so the very last paragraph: if my girl could leave me for a guy who's well established and appreciates her more than I do, I would gladly accept and never hold her hostage just because she's been with me through thick and thin. This entitlement over people's lives is the reason people resort to violent behavior. He's almost acting like he has no other choice to be violent if his current girlfriend continues to believe that they are going to get married. Also, this thick and thin reminds me of the ride or die mentality, that men like this expect a woman to be a ride or die no matter what, even if um, even if to the detriment of her mental faculties, her mental health, her sanity, her financial health. It doesn't matter. That through thick and thin, because remember, he's broke, he doesn't have a decent job, and he's likely living with her. So that means, and we don't know how long it's going to take for him to find a decent job, to get out of a broke status, and be ready to take on a responsibility of being an adult in a romantic relationship. As long as he's living with her without a decent job, broke, and she is expected to stick it out with him through thick and thin. In fact, the irony is he thinks she feels entitled to marry him, but he's feeling entitled for her to stick it out through thick and thin. That's why I say never move in a man, because there is a level of entitlement that they get used to and expect you to stick it out with them. But when they get up on their feet, they do not expect to stick it out with you. And so the risk assessment here then would be, you are sticking it out as a ride or die. And I think the implication would be that the preference wouldn't be the type of person who sticks it out with the guy through thick and thin. The preference is the person that he will take care of because he's looking for a decent job. The preference is the person that he would never be broke with, because he knows the preference would find it acceptable. So that means that in some ways he's mocking the current girlfriend for sticking it out with him, because that's why he begins, I can't believe my girlfriend really think that I'm going to marry her and we'll live happily ever after. That's mocking. That's being sarcastic. That the preference wouldn't do all the stuff that the current girlfriend is doing. And so that means that he's preparing to take care of the preference in any way imaginable, and he's going to use the current girlfriend as I guess as a come up. I have another article about that as well, as a come up, as a way to step on her, build his relationship with the preference in secret, and then when he gets the decent job, and when he's no longer broke, and when he has gotten through the process of being helped through thick and thin, then he's going to exit the relationship with the current girlfriend. So when you are considering this risk assessment, a systematic process of evaluating the potential risks that may be involved in a projected activity or undertaking, this is something that you got to think about your current romantic relationship context, the belief system that your current boyfriend has. The fact that he has to move in with you already places him or already puts you in a provider mode. There is no shame in him that says, no, I don't want my woman taking care of me. I'd rather go stay with my mother, save some money, and then get the decent job, pay her some rent, and we save together, work together, and then we get married, and then we move in together. There's no shame in him. There's no shame in him in trying to use a woman through thick and thin. There's no shame in him uh, to be broke and still be using his current girlfriend to fund his lifestyle, to fund his living expenses. There's no shame in him. And when you are thinking about risk assessment, this projected activity, just think, what if he did marry her? She would still have to be the provider, because remember, he's not looking to impress the current girlfriend who he believes uh, assumedly that she's an option. He's only looking to impress the preference. So that means he would not really care about a decent job anymore. He would not care about resolving any issues with being broke. He would not care about um, her having to endure him through thick and thin. And he might even resort to violent behavior because he would feel stuck and miserable, having not been able to find his preference and having to stay with the option, having to stay with the current girlfriend. And then if a person is staying with you out of spite, or even leaving you out of spite for helping that person, it can get really dangerous after that. So the risk assessment is something that you want to think about as you go through these relationships and have these conversations and really look at the patterns of behaviors and the ways of thinking, so that you don't waste your time. That's what a risk assessment is. If you conducted a risk assessment before you um, converted the relationship you have with the partner to long term, it's likely that you would not convert the relationship to long term. So I want you to think about these ideas, listen to the full discussion, listen to this mini discussion on risk assessment, gain some insight, reread this post. I will probably do as much as I can with this and probably use it as a case study to further explore these ideas. So this is Regina Y. Favors. You can visit my website, reginayfavors.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Just type in Regina Y. Favors. Thank you very much for listening.